Welcome. I'm Tracy Smith, and this is Here Comes the Sun, a closer look at some of the people, places, and things we bring you every weekend on Sunday morning. Actor Zoe Saldaña may be best known for her work in sci-fi franchises Guardians of the Galaxy and Avatar. But she told our Seth Doane she once worried roles like those could hold her back in Hollywood.
Saldaña says she was drawn to science fiction since she was a kid, but worried it might restrict her career.
There was always that fear, like if I say yes, will I not be considered for other parts with other directors?
And if you took these sci-fi roles, you were worried it would have
being
a negative...
typecast. Yeah, and I was already being told of a limiting career, being a woman of color, being a woman. And it's still a wobbly genre, you know, within...
What do you mean by that?
If you do those superhero movies.
Later in the show, Zoe Saldaña on how her Caribbean upbringing shaped her.
What have the bumps been along the way? What have those challenges that you've experienced?
I think my challenges have been growth. You know, I come from a culture that is just very open. English is not my first language. Even though I was born in the States and I grew up partially in the States, I still have a very Caribbean just aspect to my character that I don't think before I speak. I feel and I express my emotions. And sometimes, that can be misinterpreted, that can be misconstrued in media.
Plus, Serena Altschul introduces us to another trailblazer whose background influences their craft, Native American artist Jaune Quick-to-See Smith.
If you just let me crack the door and come through the door, I'll bring my community with me. And that's been my premise all the way along, and in the work that I'm doing right now.
You can see that commitment to raising Indigenous voices throughout her art.
My intention with making the map was, one, to talk about the stolen land, all the United States, and then I used clippings to show that Indian people do live there.
That's all coming up right here on Here Comes the Sun. Actor Zoe Saldaña lives in some rarefied Hollywood air as the only actor to star in the top 3 highest-grossing movies of all time. But as she told Seth Doane on the set of her latest spy thriller, she's not one to rest on her laurels.
She stretches our imagination, portraying characters from other worlds in Guardians of the Galaxy,
and how do you expect
Star Trek,
them when we're surrounded by Klingons, Captain?
Alert medical.
and those multi-billion-dollar franchises, Avengers and Avatar. Zoe Saldaña has acted in so many sci-fi blockbusters that she's broken an earthly record, the only actor to star in the top 3 grossing movies of all time.
It's interesting, maybe because of the types of parts that you've played and being green or blue.
You are very hard on them.
The name recognition for you isn't as high as some actors.
Yeah, playing these characters has given me a life. I can take my kids to a coffee shop and I'll be recognized, of course, sometimes, and sometimes I won't.
It's given you some anonymity.
Yes.
A New Yorker of Dominican and Puerto Rican descent, Saldaña says she was drawn to science fiction since she was a kid, but worried it might restrict her career.
There was always that fear, like if I say yes, will I not be considered for other parts with other directors?
If you took these sci-fi roles, you were worried it would have
being
a negative...
typecast. Yeah, and I was already being told of a limiting career, being a woman of color, being a woman. And it's still a wobbly genre, within...
What do you mean by that?
If you do those superhero movies.
But those superhero movies have been a boon.
I blinked, and I was a part of the biggest franchises worldwide, and they've given me so much. But I still wanted to explore more.
Which is what brought her to Morocco and the set of Special Ops Lioness.
How much of this was a concerted effort to do something different?
I think it was the primary reason.
Now you have a purpose, and it is noble.
In this spy thriller on Paramount Plus, a division of our parent company,
Neutralize the target.
Saldana plays a CIA station chief.
I just dropped a missile on it.
It's one more item I get to check off my bucket list.
What's that item?
Taylor Sheridan.
Sheridan is also the producer behind the hit series Yellowstone and its prequels.
He was the attraction to this?
Yes, and Nicole Kidman. There were a lot of items in this bucket list, and Morgan Freeman, and wanting to challenge myself, and I wanted to see if I had it in me.
She plays the lead role, a mom with a demanding job.
I think it's pretty healthy, these snacks. Do you want a banana?
It's a familiar juggle for this 45-year-old who has 3 children with Italian artist Marco Perego Saldaña. The day we met, they were on set along with her in-laws.
Can we have a cookie?
You gotta ask your mom.
And we'll just keep an eye on you. Oh my God.
It was a similar scene when we met later in Paris, where she was filming. Saldaña was 9 when her father died. Her mother, Acelia Nazario, worked sometimes as a hotel housekeeper to raise Zoe and her 2 sisters.
Pray for God to guide them and to make their dreams come true. And Zoe's dreams were very, very big, so I prayed harder for her.
Saldaña runs a production company with her sisters, promoting underrepresented storylines. She acknowledges her own missteps when it comes to representation. After portraying music legend Nina Simone in the 2016 biopic Nina, she faced harsh criticism for wearing a prosthetic nose and makeup to darken her skin.
I should have never accepted the part. I am Black. Nobody will ever tell me how to be Black. But as a person of Afro, Latino, and African heritage, I have to understand just how complex this conversation needs to be in order for me to propel accurate portrayals of women of color.
I read through interviews earlier on where you were supporting the decision to portray her. It seems that your thinking on this really evolved through the controversy.
Yes, I was being attacked so aggressively, and my instinct was to protect myself. It's very frightening when you're bullied to the extent that I was. Also, I grew up listening to her, and I felt that she did sing to me. Because if I don't fit in that world, what other world was I going to fit in? Definitely not the white world. So it was very isolating and very painful and scary. And but then growth comes from that.
Why do you think it touches you so much all these years later?
Because I love Nina Simone still. And I would love to be able to listen to her music.
You stopped listening, why?
Because I felt I had hurt her.
Saldaña told us she's sensitive to making sure there are opportunities for all, having experienced her own casting rejections.
It was always in a very mild form of like, oh, the director really liked you, but he wants to go traditional.
What do you think that meant?
It just meant that I wasn't American looking, I wasn't white.
You
But obviously they don't say it like that. They would say, oh, but the director wishes to just keep it traditional.
It led her to that genre, which captured her attention from the beginning.
Well, what are the genres, where I can go around that? Action, science fiction. They call this a gimbal.
For now, she's focusing on more terrestrial roles, on camera and off.
And it doesn't shake.
The family is...
My husband is usually here.
Big part of
also, when
things.
he's not working, he's here. And when I'm not working, I'm there in his studio. We tend to take great pride in living our lives as true artists.
Cool. I'll go let you make your art.
Thank you. Bye.
Cool. You're great.
Up next, an exclusive excerpt from our chat with Zoe Saldaña. You can only see right here on CBS News Streaming. Stay with us.
Of where I come from, learning from my experiences as well.
As promised, here's more from Seth Doane and Zoe Saldaña.
Your dad died when you were very little. Do you see ripple effects through your life because of that?
Every day. When you experience loss early in your life, it marks you as a person, it defines you as a person. And for the good and sometimes for the not so good. There's not a single day that goes by that I don't think about my dad. And I think about what could have been, what should have been, what would have been if I had him in my life.
Do you think you're a different person today because he died when you were so young?
I think it really defined a lot of my character, for sure. And my mom and my sisters, my grandma.
How so? How did it change things?
It breaks your heart. You know, your heart breaks really early before you're even able to understand what that's supposed to mean, and you feel a void, you know, that you sometimes try to fill in with good things, and you sometimes try to fill in with bad things. But I am happy that the 9 years that I had a father, that I was loved by that dad. You know, and I feel that his loss also, follow me and let me know if this makes sense. When it comes to acting, I gravitate towards my art through all of my senses. It's what I can feel, what I can touch, what I think I can see, what I can smell, what I can hear, and those were the things that remained. So talk about a ripple effect. Still to this day, I remember his laugh. He was a great dancer. You know, he just knew how to play instruments. He had a knack for grabbing a guitar and spending 36 hours just with this guitar and on his lap, and then he would end up like playing music, and you're like, that's amazing. You know, there were so many things that I still to this day actively practice in never forgetting. Because it's important now that I have these 3 little boys, and they look like my dad. You know, and I always want to remind them of where they come from and who he was. And in a way, I think I immortalize him by always remembering him.
What have the bumps been along the way? What have those challenges that you've experienced?
I think my challenges have been growth. You know, I come from a culture that is just very open. English is not my first language. Even though I was born in the States and I grew up partially in the States, I still have a very Caribbean just aspect to my character that I don't think before I speak. I feel and I express my emotions. And sometimes, you know, that can be misinterpreted, that can be misconstrued in media, and all of a sudden, it's a representation of myself that I didn't really feel that I was a part of. And that has been, you know, it's bumpy. It's bumpy learning to sort of live in a soundbite kind of way because I've chosen this path of being a public figure.
No actor has starred in more films that have grossed more than $2 billion.
Yeah. So I broke a record, you know, and it may not be an award record, but I broke a record. And knowing my journey, knowing where I started, where I am today, and where I'm aiming to always go, it's been a very extraordinary, you know, journey. And me being here, I represent so much to so many people.
What do you mean by that?
That representation matters.
Being a woman of color.
Being a daughter of immigrants. Knowing the history of where I come from. Learning from my experiences as well. Just being where I'm at, being in space as a brown face, it is important. Because I remember when I was little and I didn't have women in science fiction or in action that looked like me, that would tell me that one day I can be there. Representation matters.
Up next, meet Native American artist Jaune Quick-to-See Smith. Welcome back. Now in her 80s, Native American artist Jaune Quick-to-See Smith is finally getting her due. A retrospective of her work at New York's Whitney Museum is the first show of its kind for a Native American artist. Here's Serena Altschul.
Oh, that's great.
Artist Jaune Quick-to-See Smith certainly has her own way of seeing and painting America.
How would you describe your work to someone who hasn't seen it before?
I think that every single piece of work tells a story about Native American history or about my tribe. I really concentrate on the images, the large icons, like a map. Everybody can relate to that. And there are words there. It will give them some clues. Say, land of the giants.
Right.
Like, that's what we are.
Right.
America is all powerful.
Those clues are now on display at the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York, home to a retrospective of Smith's works.
In here are hypodermic needles, plastic water bottles.
The show will eventually travel to Fort Worth and Seattle.
Every single one of these things have a connection together.
It's a milestone moment for the artist, but also for the Whitney. This is its first retrospective for a Native American artist.
Why now?
I think what's happened is George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, and Standing Rock brought issues to the fore about the lack of representation in our institutions in this country. Every part of our society needs representation by all its citizens.
Born on the Flathead Reservation in Montana, a citizen of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, Jaune Quick-to-See Smith received the name Quick-to-See as a child.
People think that, oh, that's a great name for an artist.
Right.
But any of us that carry these names, often they're old family names. It is really about insight into things.
Her affinity for art would come later.
When I met paint, it was like an epiphany. I didn't know the word artist or what it meant, but I went to a community college and I did take art. And at the end of the year, the teacher called me in and he said, you know, you can draw better than the men, but you can't be an artist, you're a woman. And you need to know your place in life.
But Smith knew her place was in the art world. In the last 5 decades, she's had nearly 100 shows and high-profile acquisitions of her work by institutions like the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. In 2020, hers was the first painting by a Native American to join the gallery's collection.
I'm not thinking about it just as that they collected my piece and that's a grand moment. The grand moment would come when they create a collection of contemporary Native art, not just antiquities.
You know what's remarkable about you, Jaune? You never say I. You always say we and us.
I sometimes say, if you just let me crack the door and come through the door, I'll bring my community with me. And that's been my premise all the way along and in the work that I'm doing right now.
You can see that commitment to raising Indigenous voices throughout her art.
My intention with making the map was, one, to talk about the stolen land, all the United States, and then I used clippings to show that Indian people do live there. We're still here, right? We are here.
As for Smith, she calls New Mexico home, living just outside Albuquerque.
I want to see it go all the way down.
There, she and her team, which includes her son, artist Neil Ambrose Smith, keep up with the growing demand for her work.
I have to stain the horns.
But when it comes to Jaune Quick-to-See Smith, it seems the work is never done.
This is really nice. I can dream bigger and think bigger with some of the doors opening, but it's a new kind of freedom, I could say.
Yeah. I can see your excitement.
Yes.
So.
I'm Tracy Smith. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you here next time on Here Comes the Sun.